Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. A very warm good morning to everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. I welcome you back to today's analysis of the Hindu newspaper. As you know, every single day live at 10 a.m. we are here for you to bring you the analysis of the Hindu newspaper for the day. The only thing that we ask in return from you is that you make sure that you've already subscribed to our YouTube channel and you also comment in the video to let us know how are you finding these sessions and what are the other initiatives that you would like from our end. Also reminding you, as soon as this analysis session comes to an end, you all have to move to our official Telegram channel because this is where we have the Hindu quiz as well. This is a quiz based on all the topics that we discuss in this newspaper analysis. If you have still not become a part of our Telegram channel, the link for that is given in the description of the video. Now let's begin without any further ado with the very first article from today's newspaper that we want to discuss. Now, if you look at the Hindu newspaper today, the very first article that is of importance is from the editorial section. This article is based on the panchayats in India. Now, as you know, the 73rd and the 74th Amendment Act that gave the constitutional status to panchayats and to the municipalities, they recently completed 30 years, 30, which is in itself a huge milestone. These amendments were passed in December 1992. So in December 2022, they completed 30 years, 3 decades. However, as per the authors here, even though 3 decades have passed, there is still a lot of problems, especially in the working of the panchayats in India. Now, whenever you talk about the problems in the working of the panchayats or in the working of the municipalities, the one single answer or the one biggest problem has to do with the finances. See, at the end of the day, they do not have finances available to them so that they can use for development. I'm very sure all of you have read Indian polity. In Indian polity, when you read the chapter of panchayats, when you read about the 73rd Amendment Act, you know that the 73rd Amendment Act very cleverly had 2 types of provisions. One, those provisions which are compulsory for the state governments to follow. For example, having Gram Sabha, for example, having elections once in 5 years, for example, establishing state finance commission, so on and so forth. On the other hand, there were some provisions that were voluntary. Voluntary means it was not compulsory on the state government whether or not they want to go ahead with these provisions or not. Those voluntary provisions were mainly about giving financial powers and responsibilities. So the state governments were given an option. If they wanted to give certain financial powers to the panchayats, they could. If they did not want to give that, that was also fine. No one could go to the Supreme Court against them. That is how the 73rd Amendment could be passed. However, this is the reason behind the panchayats not being able to work properly in the country. This article mostly talks about Telangana. Although the situation unfortunately is the same across multiple states in India. But in this article specifically they have written about the situation in Telangana. According to these authors, in Telangana the state government is not giving money to panchayats. The money that was earlier promised to panchayats, the development funds that were promised to panchayats are now not being disbursed to them. And that is actually creating a lot of trouble. Recently, for example, there was an Up Sarpanch, means kind of a deputy chairman of the panchayat, who actually committed suicide. Why? Because this Up Sarpanch had to do some development work in his village. For that development work, the state government first promised him that okay, we'll give you certain money, but then they did not transfer any money. So what happened was that this Up Sarpanch was actually told that don't worry, you actually go ahead and take a loan from the bank. And once the state government gives you the money back, you can repay that particular loan. But what has happened is, because the state government did not actually give any money, that Up Sarpanch was under so much pressure that at the end of the day, the Up Sarpanch had to commit suicide. Just imagine that. The Up Sarpanch committing suicide, not because of something that he had done, not because of the loan that he had taken personally. He had taken a loan for development work in his village and that loan had to be repaid by the state government, which the state government did not do, and at the end of the day that Sarpanch committed suicide. Now, as sad as it may sound, the harsh reality is this is not the first time that something like this has happened. There have been multiple cases where this has happened in the past, especially in the state of Telangana. Now, as per the authors, there are two problems. Number one, the state governments either don't give money. Secondly, even if they do give money, or even if they promise that we will give you the money, when it comes to transferring money, when it comes to dispersing money, there are so many permissions that the panchayat sachiv and the panchayat sarpanch have to take that it becomes almost impossible for this money to come from the state governments to the panchayats. If you have anyone in your friends who works with the government, when I say works with the government means has taken some contract of the government or provides certain services to the government, and any government, state government, center government, whatever, just ask them and they will tell you that taking money from the government is by far the most difficult thing that anyone can do. Any government whatsoever. If, let's say, you provide certain services to the government, let's say you are someone who supplied some furniture to the government offices, you are someone who supplied certain electrical appliances to the government offices. Extracting money from the government is very, very difficult. It's not because the government doesn't want to pay. It is because there are so many levels, you have to get permissions, you have to get signs at so many different levels that it actually becomes a very, very cumbersome process. And the same has been seen in case of panchayats as well. Now, if you see in India, panchayats mainly get money from three different sources. First, they are allowed that, okay, you can raise certain taxes on your own, which is very rare, which is very, very rare. But in certain states, they are given the permission to have their own taxes and their own fees. I'll give you a real example. So, let's say when you go to some tourist place in India. Now, when you go to certain hill stations, and you would see that there are certain waterfalls or there are certain caves where tourists go and visit. Now, when you go to these waterfalls, when you go to these, let's say, caves and other kind of things, you are going by car, you will have a car parking there. So when you park the car, many times the state government allows the local gram panchayat to collect the parking fee, and that becomes their source of revenue. But it depends on state to state. Some states may allow this to happen, some states may not allow this to happen. So this is the first source of revenue for the panchayat, to have their own taxes, to have their own revenue, but it is very, very small. Because as I said, there are very small number of states that allow this. The second source of revenue for the state government is that when the state government or the central government gives certain money to panchayats, this is usually on the recommendation of the finance commission. The finance commission at the central government level and the finance commission at the state level also, both of them recommend to the government to transfer some money to the states. And then that money, some part of it also goes to panchayats. That is the second source of revenue. The third source of revenue is mainly with respect to certain government schemes. For example, if the government of India announces certain schemes in certain villages, to implement that scheme, the panchayat might get some money. So these are the three main sources of revenue. Number one, panchayat being allowed to have its own taxes. This is very small. Second, panchayat getting some money from state or center government on recommendation of finance commission. And third, panchayat getting some money when it comes to certain government schemes. Now the problem is, most part of panchayat's money for development comes from this second category, where the finance commission suggests. But that is something that gets delayed very, very long. This is what we saw happen in Telangana as well. This was delayed to such a long extent that this Sarpanch unfortunately had no other option but to commit suicide, because the loan that was taken for his village development was actually on his name. Now, not just this, there is one more problem to it. Even when the state government says to panchayat, okay, you can spend some money, even spending that money is very difficult. Many of you would have seen that web series called Panchayat, in which you see that panchayat sachiv or panchayat secretary, right? Now, when you see those kind of people, panchayat sachiv or panchayat secretary, if you have not seen this, let me tell you what this is. Every village has a panchayat, Now, from the side of the government, there is an officer who is appointed in every panchayat called the panchayat secretary. In Hindi, you call it the panchayat sachiv. Now, when the panchayat has to spend any money on all the checks, not just the sarpanch, but the panchayat secretary also has to sign. Many times a panchayat secretary might be under pressure from the state government not to sign on the check because the state government does not want to spend money. So that also becomes a part of the problem. The sarpanch alone cannot spend money for development of the panchayat. They will have to take sign of panchayat secretary as well, and that panchayat secretary is mostly answerable to the state government. That also becomes a problem. Not just this, we also have an issue where approval requires a lot of time. Approval for even most small things. For example, let's say in a village, they don't have a road, they don't have a hospital, they don't have a well, and they want to, let's say, make a road, or they want to make a small area developed in the form of a park. In that case, they will again have to take a lot of permissions from the state governments, and only in that case, only when those permissions come in, that is when the development work can go ahead. So all of this means that the panchayats, although they have been given constitutional status, but they are still lacking a lot of things, which mainly comes down to the money that they do not have. Now, I'm very sure that when you read M. Lakshmikant book, and when you read the panchayat chapter, the local government chapter, all of you read about various committees, right? You read about the Balwant Mehta committee, you read about the Ashok Mehta committee, you read about the L.M. Singhvi committee, so on and so forth, Hanumanta Rao committee. However, those committees are old committees that were formed before panchayat was given the constitutional status. Let me give you example of another committee, a committee which was formed in 2018, and this committee was actually asked to give suggestions on how to improve the working of the panchayats. This committee was called Dr. P. Venugopal Committee. Now, what did the committee say? The committee suggested, number one, panchayats should be given more power to decide what kind of development should happen, more powers to decide how to spend money, more powers to take their own decision, because at the end of the day, that is the entire purpose of the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act. Then, the committee also suggested giving more funds to the panchayats, allowing them to have more fee, allowing them to raise more taxes in various forms. See, the problem here is, if you look at how Indian system works, the issue really is that we have a very, very small tax base. Out of all the people who are actually working in India, very, very few people actually pay income tax. Most of the people evade taxes, because of which neither the central government nor the state governments have enough money to actually then pass it on to panchayats or municipalities. That is why no state government willingly transfers a lot of money to panchayats. This is what a suggestion has been given from this committee. The next point that they stressed upon was that there should be capacity building. Now, what do you mean by capacity building? See, in simple terms, when someone wins the panchayat election, let's assume someone becomes a sarpanch or panchayat members, they might not know how the panchayat will function. They might not know how the files have to be written. They might not know how the permission has to be taken from, let's say, the DM to spend certain money. So they should also be trained. Yes, they have won the election, they have become members of the panchayat, but they might not know how does it all function. Because see, at the center government level, when someone becomes a member of parliament, they have a lot of IAS officers to support them, to tell them how the parliament functions, how the bills are made, etc. But then at the panchayat level, they don't have these kind of things. So there should be capacity building, and there should be more support staff as well to run the panchayats. These are certain suggestions given by Dr. P. Venugopal Committee. You can use these in your main answer writing, because these kind of questions about panchayats, how to improve their working, are very, very, very common. Before I go ahead to the second important article of the day, let me quickly take up a few questions. There is a question from Saurav. Saurav is saying, is this executive control on democratic elected despite panchayat is a strong wheel of democracy? I'm not sure if you have framed your question correctly, but I think your question is it in the spirit of democracy that a democratically elected panchayat is being controlled by the executive? See, In India, executive is also part of legislative. So when panchayats are given certain directions, it all flows down from the state government. So it's not that non-elected people are giving order to panchayats. At the end of the day, it is elected state government only that is doing it. Then I have a question from Anmol, who is Up Sarpanch. Up Sarpanch means deputy Sarpanch. So there is Sarpanch who will be at the top, and then deputy to like deputy speaker. That would be deputy Sarpanch. Up Sarpanch basically. Then I have a question, constitutional status of panchayat. Yes, panchayats have a constitutional status. In simple terms, that means that if a state government does not form panchayat, they don't have elections to panchayats, then you can go against it in the Supreme Court. Then I have... Okay, I'll take one more question. I have a question which says, can panchayat get finances from consolidated fund of the state? Absolutely they can. That is, I was telling you, there is a Finance Commission of India that suggests to central government how much funds should be transferred to panchayats. Similarly, we also have Finance Commission for different states which are formed by the governor. They suggest how much money from the state finances should go to the panchayats. Perfect. Let's move on to the second important article of the day. The second important article is about India having the president's role in the G20 and how can it be extremely important for South Asia. Now, in the past few days, multiple articles have been written on South Asia. Now, when you say South Asia, that usually means India, Pakistan, there's Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Nepal, Myanmar. These are the nations, Maldives also. These are the nations that we include in South Asia. We don't include China in this, do remember. Mainly when you talk about SAARC, the SAARC nations are the South Asian nations. Now, it is kind of very baffling that South Asia is one of the most underdeveloped nations, one of the most underdeveloped areas in the entire world, when in reality, South Asia has a lot of potential. See, South Asia has a huge population. It has a very huge middle class, people's purchasing power is increasing. Not just this, we also have a lot of things in common. In the sense that a lot of us were ruled by one single nation together. So we know each other's culture, there is a lot of things which are similar. Even then, for some reason, South Asia has not been able to come and work together. And this is actually very odd. Look at other regions around the world. Look at ASEAN nations, the Southeast Asian nations. Look at African nations working together in the African Union. Look at Europe working together as the European Union. Look at how we have South America that is also working together by making various organizations. We have the NAFTA deal where North America is working together. So all of these organizations indicate that regional organizations can come and work together if the regions want their own prosperity. But in case of South Asia, it has not happened. And it is very, very confusing because ideally all the reasons point out towards the fact that South Asia should have been ideally working together. But there are various reasons that we are not able to work together. Number one, we don't trust each other. We always had this issue of India-Pakistan. We always have most of the nations not trusting Pakistan. We have an issue of terrorism. We also have unresolved border issues that have not been resolved so far. And all of that together has meant that South Asia has still not been able to work together. But right now, the author is saying South Asia is facing multiple problems together. There's a problem of global warming. We saw the devastating floods in Pakistan. There's a problem of pollution. This region remains one of the most polluted regions in the world. If you look at the list of top 10 most polluted cities in the world, 9 of them come from South Asia. We have a problem of overpopulation. We have a problem of corruption. All these things are common in our region. So ideally, we should have been working together. The author says that now that India has become the president of G20, this is a great chance for India to actually talk as a representative of South Asia and argue in the world that South Asia also needs help from developed nations as much as other nations do. This will also help India establish a great image in South Asia. See, the reason why South Asia has not been successful, although there are multiple reasons, one reason is because if you look at the size of the nation, I'll just show you a map to actually just see this and you will be able to understand. Look at the size of all the nations. India has a much bigger size as compared to all other nations of South Asia. With this comes a feeling of distrust. Many nations don't trust India. They think it's too big a country. It will capture their market. So when India takes up a position of the leader of South Asia and represents South Asia in G20 as a president, this will actually improve India's image. That is what the authors are trying to say here. That G20 presidency actually gives a chance to India to talk as a group and take forward the agenda of South Asia, because the problems that we are facing, all of these problems are combined. I told you earlier as well, if there is pollution in Pakistan, the smoke, the bad air will not just stop in Pakistan, it will come to India obviously. It will then go to other countries. The pollution will not stop thinking I don't have visa, I don't have passport, how do I go to other countries? No. The atmosphere, all the pollution, all of that is connected in the region, especially when the countries are so close to each other. And that is where we have to understand that one country's problem is actually the problem of all the countries together. And that is where South Asia has to understand that we can have much better relation in terms of trade, in terms of people's movement, if we just start trusting each other more. There was also a suggestion given by an expert earlier that because South Asia has such huge population, we can also act as a pressure group. How? For example, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, we all import such huge amounts of oil. Maybe we can form a group and negotiate at the international stage that give us a better price, only then we will buy oil from you. And we have that ability to pressurize those who are selling oil, because we can form a pressure group altogether. We can also form a cartel, just like the oil producing nations have formed a cartel. Oil consuming nations can also do the same, only if South Asia decides to come together. That is also something that has to be explored. Then, all the nations in South Asia understand the importance of going towards renewable energy, but it also requires a lot of money, for which we need funding from the developed nations, and India can take forward this demand of South Asia at the international stage at the G20 summit. So now the ball is in India's court to see if we really want to play the role of a leader of South Asia when it comes to the G20 summit. Now, as I told you, South Asia ideally has all the reasons to succeed as a regional group. It has all these things going in our favor. Common culture, common past, common languages also in many cases, shared history, more or less similar economic situation. But even then we have not been able to take that advantage, and there are multiple challenges. Why? First challenge of all of those, the trade that we have amongst the South Asian nations is very, very low. Look at how ASEAN, look at how EU works. They have been able to increase their trade considerably, but we have not been able to do that. When SAARC came into being, we thought we'll set up a free South Asia trade area, but that has not been successful. So that also has to be worked upon. Second, there is a lot of external influence from nations such as China. China has a lot of influence in Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. US also is trying to enter this region by a lot of exerting their influence in Nepal, Pakistan, etc. So the nations in South Asia, rather than dealing amongst themselves, are also pressurized by these major powers. Then we also have territorial issues. There are maps disputes, there are territory disputes that have still not been resolved, and also we have not been able to have a proper transit access to each other. For example, if India's truck wants to go to Afghanistan, Pakistan does not give permission. If India wants to send our truck to our own northeastern nation through Bangladesh, Bangladesh sometimes doesn't give permission. So this transit access has also not been given, which has also not helped our trade increase. Now, apart from that, what can India do? As I told you, India has to play the role of the big brother. We are much, much larger as compared to any other nation in South Asia, be it in terms of economy, be it in terms of territory, be it in terms of the status that we have at the international level, and we have to leverage that in favor of South Asia. So we have to boost regional trade, maybe by offering that, okay, we will not impose a lot of taxes on you. Then we have to ensure that we are the ones who share whatever technology that we have when it comes to green energy, when it comes to helping them out. Then we also have to highlight the need for food security. For example, We have to tell the other nations also that you need to keep more food grains with you so that in the long run you might need it, so that they don't come under pressure of the developed nations all of a sudden. Then we have to ensure that India becomes a voice of this region at the international level, as this article suggests for the G20. Before I move on to the next one, let me take a few questions. Vignesh has been asking this. Everyone says G20, but ultimately, everyone says G20, but ultimately, what every initiative came up by India is mostly implemented in India only. We cannot influence other countries, and why is it so significant? So, no one is saying that the president of the G20, India or Indonesia, Brazil, can influence G20 country. But what happens, how G20 works is, let's say now G20 summit is being held in India. So the host country decides a topic of discussions. The host country decides a theme. So if we decide, for example, that India decides that the theme will be Global South. So we can steer the discussion in that area where the developed nations will be discussing how to help the developing nations more. So that is what India's responsibility is. Yes, we cannot force anyone to give any money to any country, but we can really steer the discussion in that way. Then I have a question from Peter Parker. What's the importance and role of India's G20 presidency? What should be India's goal to achieve during its presidency? As I told you, as a president of G20, you cannot expect any country to change what G20 does or have a lasting influence. But as a G20 nation, you are the ones who decide the theme, you are the ones who decide the discussions. So at least you will have 2 days of world's topmost leaders discussing certain topics that you decide. That is where you can either give priority to, let's say, environment, you can give priority to developed versus developing nations, you can give priority to, let's say, climate change, you can give priority to AI, technology, whatever you want. So this is where the G20 presidency becomes so significant. Perfect. Let's move on. The next article I want to discuss here is with respect to tuberculosis. Now, this article quotes a former WHO scientist who says India can lead efforts to find a new TB vaccine. Now, let me ask this question to you in very short. Do we have a TB vaccine right now? You can tell me yes or no. Do we have a vaccine for tuberculosis right now, or we don't have a vaccine? Okay, so the answer is yes, we do have a vaccine. So there is a tuberculosis vaccine called the BCG. However, it is not very effective. It is not very effective. There is a vaccine called BCG. That BCG vaccine was developed about 100 years ago. So it has not been very effective because we still see a lot of people catching tuberculosis. The reason being, see, these kind of diseases, they change their structure so frequently that you also have to ensure that your vaccine adopts to it, which has not been done in this case. So while the entire world has been focusing on other kinds of diseases, tuberculosis somewhere down the line has actually left the public imagination when it comes to making or updating our vaccine. So we do have a BCG vaccine, but it is almost 100 years old, so it doesn't really work well. So now the entire world has to work more towards having a new vaccine. That is what the theme of the article is. And because India has so many cases of tuberculosis, that is why, as per the former WHO scientist, India should lead those efforts, because India is the one which has so many cases of tuberculosis. Recently, we had the National TB Prevalence Survey. In this survey, it was found out that about 300 people per 1 lakh people in India are suffering from tuberculosis. The death rate is about 4 to 5%. Now, there are multiple reasons for tuberculosis. One of these is considered as undernutrition. People not having enough nutrition in their body, which is considered as a reason why people actually contract tuberculosis, where India has to work. Now, it's not that this is a new kind of a disease and we are just waking up to it. The issue is because in the past 2 years or so, the entire world has just been focused on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccine, that in the past 2 years, a lot of our focus has shifted from other diseases. Tuberculosis, malaria, these kind of things have always been a huge issue in India. However, because our focus for 2.5, 3 years has mostly been on COVID, we have not really ensured that against other diseases also we do have the exact kind of treatment. Now, I also wanted to show you some of the important findings of the World Tuberculosis Report of 2022. As per this report, about 10.6 million people in the world were diagnosed with TB in 2021. That is over 10 crore people. That has increased by 4.5%. Now again, that increase was expected because the entire world was focused towards COVID and our efforts towards tuberculosis and other kind of diseases were not that serious. If you look at India specifically, 28% of the world's cases are actually coming from India, and in fact 36% of the world's TB deaths are coming from India, which is a huge concern. Although we have started multiple initiatives, I'll give you examples of some. We have started multiple initiatives to get rid of TB, but we have not been successful because of various reasons. The first reason being that there is a rise in drug-resistant tuberculosis. Now, what is drug-resistant tuberculosis? See, in India, unfortunately, we have a habit that if anyone falls ill, let's say you fall ill, your friends fall ill, anyone in the family falls ill, we don't go to a doctor. We ask someone who is a friend that you also fell ill last month, what medicine did you eat? Tell me, I'll also eat the same medicine. Because we think every fever is the same fever. Every ache in the stomach is the same ache in the stomach. If one medicine worked on someone else, it will work on me also. That is how Indians usually operate, unfortunately. So we consume a lot more medicines than we need to. We consume a lot more wrong medicines just by experimenting on our body, because we think that our doctors who have studied for 5.5 to 6 years, they don't know anything. My friend knows a lot of things because he got fever last time. Or if that is not an option, you go to the medical store and ask him, what do I have to do if I have these symptoms? The guy that you're asking on the medical store, his only qualification is that he can read the doctor's prescription, nothing else. That is his only qualification, that he is able to read the doctor's handwriting. But you trust him so much that you tell me what do I have to eat. So the problem here is we consume so many medicines because medicines are so readily available in India. If you go to most other nations, you can't just go to a medical store, buy whatever medicine that you want. Only few medicines can be bought in a nation outside India over the counter. Other medicines cannot be bought without a doctor's prescription. But in India, you can buy almost anything without doctor's prescription, and you also know that. Because of that, our body has become so habitual to certain antibiotics that when you actually eat the medicine that you require, that will not have any impact on the disease. Because your body has gotten so used to it. You become resistant to that drug. You become resistant to that medicine. So when you actually get TB, when you start eating that medicine, it will not have any impact on you because you have become drug resistant. That is a huge problem in India. Then we also have a problem, as I told you, because of COVID-19. All the efforts of making medicines, vaccine were focused on COVID, so we did not focus on other diseases, so there's a shortage of that as well. Then there is also an issue of under-reporting. See, unfortunately in India and many other developing nations, we still have a very weird kind of tendency. For example, if someone tells you I have TB, first you will move away from him or her, that is fine, not a problem with that. But for some reason you start blaming that person, you got TB, oh, you did something wrong. We actually blame the victim here rather than thinking, oh, something wrong has happened, let me try and help him or her out. We try to blame the victim. So that is why many people don't even like to share or don't even like to come out saying I have TB or tuberculosis. There's a lot of under-reporting that happens because for some reason, we believe that if I tell the world that I have COVID, people will not talk to me. People will not come near me if I tell them I have TB. So a lot of under-reporting also happens, especially in the rural areas. Even the facilities to actually diagnose TB are not that prevalent. So there's a problem of diagnosing TB, and even if the person comes out with these kind of issues, it is very difficult for the people to actually come out and accept. So there's a lot of under-reporting as well. Now this data is slightly older. This data is of December 2018, but the proportion is not very different. For example, in 2018, if you see, India had about 27% of the world's TB cases. It is similar to 26% even today. So not a lot has changed in terms of, if you see, how many cases do India contribute to the world when it comes to tuberculosis. As I told you, India has been doing a lot of things to fight against TB. For example, we have been running Pradhan Mantri TB Mukt Bharat Abhiyan. The aim is to eliminate TB by 2025. Original target was 2030. We have preponed it to 2025, but that doesn't really look very achievable at the rate that we are going. So most probably it will not really actually be achieved. Then we also have the Nikshay Mitra, under which those who want to get diagnosed, those who want to get support, nutrition, etc., will be held by the government. The Government of India, along with WHO, also publishes the National TB Prevalence Survey that talks about what kind of issues that TB patients are facing and how can the government actually help. Then I come to the next topic. Before I do that, let me see if there are a few questions. Satyanarayan has a question. India is the world's largest vaccine manufacturer. Why lots of diseases in terms of percentages high? Not a lot of diseases can be stopped by vaccine, so there's not a direct correlation. If you talk about polio, for example, we have been able to eradicate that. So, but diseases such as diabetes, for example, they can't be cured with vaccine. I don't think there's a correlation between being the world's largest manufacturer of vaccines and having so many diseases. Diseases more got to do with your nutrition, your way of life, your tendency to not visit a doctor, healthcare, etc. Then I have a question from Deep Shikha. Why, despite so many years, TB cases are mostly the same with little progress? See, in a country like India's scale, it's difficult to make an impact at such a fast pace. The numbers would have been better, but as I told you, the last 2.5 years, everyone's focus was just on curtailing COVID. So in the last 2.5 years, you can excuse the government by not focusing on this. That is why the numbers are not really improved. Hopefully the numbers should improve from now as compared to, let's say, 5 years from now. But again, a lot of things have to come together. Government of India has to inform more people of coming out, the diagnosis has to improve, and a lot of other things have to actually come in picture so that the government can actually achieve its target. Then I'll take one more and then I'll go ahead. Why India spends less on healthcare? See, it's like saying that you have 100 rupee note. Okay, let's say I give you 100 rupees and I tell you spend on whatever you want. So you, let's say, spend 50 rupees on the food, you spend 20 rupees on going somewhere because that is also necessary, 10 rupees at your electricity bill, and then you're left with 20 rupees. And then I tell you, why do you spend so little on healthcare? You should spend at least 90 rupees on healthcare. So what will you say? You will say I spend less on healthcare because I don't have money, as simple as that. So the same is the case with India as well. Yes, you can blame the Indian government saying they don't spend enough on healthcare, but then the tax base that we have is so low in India and the number of people in India are so high, the welfare schemes, the defense budget is so high that India doesn't get any money left in its own hands to actually spend on healthcare. So the answer has to be increasing our tax base and nothing else, and reducing the subsidies and freebies. Okay. And one last question. Japan has good health facilities, but why not India? See, if India had the same population as Japan, our healthcare facilities would have been much better than them. You can't compare a country that has 1/10 the population of India, or even less than 1/10 the population of India. So that is not fair. So I will just leave the comparison at that. Next is a news article from the front page, that is, our foreign minister saying that we did not wait, but we have helped Sri Lanka. Now, what help have we given? Let's try and understand this. You all know over the past few months, Sri Lanka has been in a lot of issue, especially the issue that they have is with respect to the loan that they have been seeking from IMF. Now, in the past few months, what has happened in short is, Sri Lanka asked for a loan from IMF. Okay, the loan was about $2.9 billion. So IMF said, okay, we will give you the loan, but there are many conditions. One condition that IMF had put was, IMF told Sri Lanka, you have already taken loan from many countries, mainly 3 countries, India, China, Japan. India, China, Japan are the 3 countries that have mainly given loan to Sri Lanka. So IMF told Sri Lanka, we will give you our loan also, but first take a written guarantee from India, China and Japan that they will restructure your debt. For example, if India has given a debt to Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka has to pay us back, IMF wants India to say, okay, we will take lower EMIs from Sri Lanka so that Sri Lanka has enough money left to pay the IMF also. This is a guarantee that IMF wants from India, China and Japan. The guarantee is of debt restructuring, meaning that India, China, Japan should give a guarantee that, okay, we will take lesser money from Sri Lanka, we will take lesser EMI from Sri Lanka, so that Sri Lanka has some money to give back to IMF also. Out of all these three nations, India, China and Japan, where Sri Lanka has been requesting all these three, please give us this assurance, please write a letter, IMF will agree, only then India has become the first country to come ahead and give the assurance. So our foreign minister has said that we are not waiting for China or Japan, we like our friend Sri Lanka, we want to help them, so we are helping Sri Lanka and we are assuring IMF that don't worry, we are restructuring their debt, we will take lesser EMIs now, don't worry about that. So that is what the news is, that we are now helping Sri Lanka come out of it. Now Sri Lanka's foreign debt has become a major issue. If you look at how their foreign debt is increasing in the past few months, this is a very, very sad situation. See, Sri Lanka used to be the richest country in South Asia. If you look at South Asia, Sri Lanka had better social indicators than almost all of India. I'll just give you an example. If you talk about social indicators in India like health, literacy, etc., state by state, you would see that Kerala is usually at the top. In terms of health, in terms of literacy, etc., Kerala usually has better indicators than most of the Indian states. Now imagine Sri Lanka's indicators were even better than Kerala also. So for Sri Lanka in South Asia, it was always a country that did very well. But in the past few years, starting from the 2019 bomb blast in Sri Lanka, the situation has become very, very, very bad. In 2019, for example, we had the infamous Easter bomb blast, because of which many tourists cancelled their plan to Sri Lanka. Now, Sri Lanka mainly earns money by exporting tea and coffee and by tourists who come to Sri Lanka. But when the tourists stopped coming from 2019, that was a big, big problem for Sri Lanka. Then COVID hit, as you know. In COVID, there was no travel all around the world. So again, the income of Sri Lanka hit a major, major low. Then there was their own decision that no one understood till now. Sri Lanka overnight decided that all of a sudden they will make organic farming compulsory. All of a sudden, we will go organic, no fertilizer will be used, we will become 100% organic, just because they wanted to tell the world, see, this is what we are doing. But it backfired so much that there was shortage of food, the farmers were just not prepared for it, and it became such a huge mess in Sri Lanka that inflation has become so much, people can't afford food, they don't have oil, they don't have even the basic amenities right now. So yes, some of it has got to do with causes that they could not control in terms of COVID, but a lot of the mess that Sri Lanka is in is because of their own decision of going organic without any scientific input whatsoever. Then their growing closeness with Sri Lanka is also not held. So their growing closeness with China also has not held. As you know, China has been giving a lot of loan to Sri Lanka, and Chinese loans come with a lot of conditions. Chinese loans, for example, number one, are usually above the market rate. Also, it is very difficult to repay the Chinese loans. If you don't repay them, they will take away your territory, that they have done with Hambantota also. So all of these together now have put Sri Lanka into a massive, massive issue. They're trying to come out of it slowly by taking a lot of loans from IMF, but the recent loan of $2.9 billion will only come in if India, China and Japan give the guarantee, where India has done this already. These were the important news stories from the Hindu newspaper that we want to discuss with you today. There are a couple of practice questions. Number one, a stable neighborhood is a necessity for a stable nation. Elaborate in context of Sri Lanka's ongoing debt crisis. Second, despite various campaigns and initiatives, the fight against tuberculosis doesn't seem to be heading anywhere. Assess the possible reasons. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Again, you can use our answer writing portal where students can write answers, give each other feedback. You can use a link given in the description of the video. Now you have to head over to our official Telegram channel to give the quiz based on these articles so that you can revise very quickly what we have just studied. If you are still not a part of our Telegram channel, please use the link given in the description of the video. Perfect. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be together again 10 a.m. tomorrow, just like every single day, with our Hindu newspaper analysis. Have a good day ahead. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.